Welcome back with the Peace Building and Security Councils. So I hope that you enjoyed and take your time to have a look on the slides, how the Peace Building and Security Councils works. So now moving forward, let's have a look on developing peace and development of education. So there are 6 issues in peace and development education include nonviolence conflict, resolutions techniques, democracy, disarmament, gender equality, human rights, environmental responsibilities, history, communication skills, coexistence, international understanding, and tolerance of diversity. So these are some issues on which this organization work and have projects and have fellowships and have jobs or position on these topics. If you are expert in one of this area, you can easily apply and work in this sector. So let's moving toward the conflicts resolution. What are the conflicts and what are the different, how to resolve it, how to manage it, and how to transform it. Conflict resolution is conceptualized as the method and processes involved in facilitating the peaceful ending of conflicts, right? So while conflict management is a process of limiting the negative aspects of the conflict while increasing the positive aspect of conflict. The aim of conflict management is to enhance learning and group outcome, including effectiveness or performance in an organizational settings. So this is the difference between resolution and management. So what is conflict transformation? Let's have a look. Conflict transformation is the process by which conflicts such as ethnic conflict are transformed into a peaceful outcomes. It differs from conflict resolutions and conflict management approaches that it recognizes that contemporary conflict requires more than the reaffirming of positions and the identification of win-win outcome, right? Like both parties think or propose or suppose that they win. No one is at the loser point, right? So the very structure of parties and relationship may be embedded in a pattern of conflictual relationship that extended beyond the particle site of conflict. And conflict transformation is therefore a process of engaging with and transforming the relationship, interests, discourses, and if necessary, the very constitution of society that support the continuation of violent conflict, right? So these are the 3 types. Now, let's have a look on how to reduce the violence, how to increase the justice, and how to understand the conflict while we're developing the peace and development educations, right? So conflict transformation view, peace are centered and rooted in the quality of relationship. These relationships have 2 dimensions, our face-to-face interaction and the ways we structured our social, political, economic, and cultural relationship. So conflict transformation suggests that a fundamental way to promote constructive change on all these levels is dialogue, right? So dialogue is essential. Dialogue is essential part to justice and peace on both an interpersonal and structural level. Conflict does have 2 sides. Conflict has 2 sides. It can be good and it can be bad. So conflict is itself a normal part of the being human, right? Being human, you can have conflict anytime with anyone. So violent conflict is bad, right? While conflict can also have good characteristics. Conflict is a state of opposition between ideas, interest, disagreements, or controversy. Uh, Friction or conflict may have negative as well as positive characteristics. The reason and the causes of the conflict must be understood in order to know how best to resolve the conflict. Some conflicts, by its very nature, cannot be resolved. It can be contained and managed so that its negative impact can be reduced, right? So these are some main things, like how you can reduce the violence and how you can understand the conflicts. Understanding conflict is another major thing while dealing in such processes. So let's have a look on types of conflicts. So I find out some different types of conflicts. Let's discuss on these, that what is conflict and what are different types. A conflict that occur in an individual, and it is not always easy to identify, but it can become a apparent when mood swings are present or depression is evident, right? So interpersonal conflict is also apparent when a person has trouble choosing between two or more goals. This is the most common form of conflict. Is the one side, the person, like one person has this problem, like which goal he should choose or which process he should choose. So each person has or his own way of solving this kind of conflicts. It's individual basis. The first one, like character versus self. So this is an internal conflict, meaning that the opposition the character faces is coming from within self. You have conflict with your own self, right? That your inner self. So such conflicts, I'm sure that such type of conflicts can be resolved with meditation. Meditation is a very strong process and it helps you to understand and resolve these issues. And I think when you are in such a profession, so you definitely need meditation to overcome your problems and to guide your inner self that what you have to do. So this may entail a struggle to when the mental or the right choice is, or it may also encompasses mental health struggles. So all other types of conflicts are external, meaning that a character comes up against an outside force that creates the conflict. So this was the character inside you, right? The second one is character versus character. This is another interesting conflict. This is a common type of conflict in which one character needs or wants are at odds with another's. A character conflict can be depicted as straightforward first fight or as a what I can say, the ongoing struggle for power. The examples are like it's in HBO series, The Games of Thrones, right? It is character versus characteristics. So the next one is character versus nature. In a nature conflict, a character is a set in opposition to nature. This can mean the weather, the wilderness, or the natural disaster. For example, in The Old Man and the Sea, the main character, Santiago, finally manages to reel in a fish after a month and months of bad luck. So it is like a story. He was in the conflict with the nature, right? These are not such important, but I think these conflicts definitely has some impact on your mental wellness because you are struggling with something, and you have competition with these type of things that you have to achieve this. Otherwise, you think that you are a failure. So the next one is character versus supernatural. Pitting characters against a phenomena like ghosts, gods, or monster raises the stakes of a conflict by creating an unequal playing field. So supernatural conflict also covers characters like Harry Potter and like Disney characters, this type of. And even the funny thing is that we believe it, we watch these movies and we are so much deep down absorb these characters that we think that these are the natural, right? The next one is the character versus technology. In this case, a character is in conflict with some kind of technology. Think of the tale of John Harry, the African American folk hero in American folk lore. Henry was a former slave who worked as a steel driver on the rail line, and to prove his superiority over new technology, he raced a steam-powered rock drilling machine and won. Right. So these are the example of different type of conflicts. You want to prove yourself that you are superior, and it can be with anything. These conflicts can be with anything, with yourself, with the outside, with the supernatural, with the technology, such and so on. And like the last one is character versus society. So a character versus society conflict is an external conflict that occurs in literature when it is placed in opposition with the society, the government, or the cultural tradition, or concerns, norms of some kind. So this one is the most important, because in this, the society and the government or outside other things are involved. So characters may be motivated to take action against their society by a need to survive, a moral sense of right and wrong, and a desire for happiness, freedom, justice, or love. So it can be dangerous when you have some conflict against some tribe, some country, or any religion-based, like different kind of conflicts comes under these definitions. Now let's move toward the characteristics of conflict. There are two main characteristics in which conflict can be grouped. The destructive conflict is negative characteristics, while the constructive conflict, it is positive type of conflict. Positive conflict is, I think, good because it helps you to understand and groom your personality. Let's have a look on the sources of conflict. The first one is structural conflict. Structural conflict caused by the equal and unfair distribution of power and resources, inherent powers of dominant groups, unequal political power, institutional power exercised unfairly, geographical and environmental factors may contribute to the structural conflict within the organization, right? Informational conflict, lack of data and information, incorrect information presented, or misinformation, differing views about what info is relevant and how data is to be interpreted and how assessment of data is performed. So poor communication of critical and important information, unclear communication, gossips, and false stories can lead to violence. So these are the main sources which are mostly related to these jobs and this designation in which the ambassadors or the presenters or the diplomats have to take care. Relationships, strong emotional feeling about things in general, repetitive negative behavior, stereotyping of others or yourself, personality conflict, unstable personalities, incompatible relationship in the team, inside the office, outside the office, in any organization or the country, right? So negative body language towards other conflict, someone think that their body language is negative toward me. So passive aggressions, unfair discriminatory conduct toward others, and bad relationship can cause destructive conflicts. Interest involve actual or perceived competition over interests such as resources, the way a dispute is resolved, are perceptions about fairness and trust. So the failure to protect interest are the threat to those interests. Competition and fighting for access to limited and scarce resources. So these are some types of the sources of the conflict. You need to think about it. I think you can re-watch this video to understand this deeply, and what are the differences, and how you will manage, or you can maybe relate it with any example in real, right? The last one is the values. Ideological differences, conflicting belief systems, differing standards applied based on social and or ideological preferences, and imposing values of dominant group showing no respect for the right of others. I hope you understand it. Okay. So there are 5 ways to resolving the conflicts. We learned about the conflicts, their types and the sources. So now we are on the point that how to resolve it. There are usually 5 ways to decide how to respond to the conflict, right? Competitive. When there is a fight and the parties have different interests and needs, and claim opposing rights, right? Another one is avoidance, if you can avoid it. So stay away from dealing with the problem. It's the simple, easy way. Compromise. Parties try to find middle ground to address the conflict. Sometimes you have to compromise. Both parties think it like, yeah, okay, we are on the win-win situation. It's okay if I'm not getting the full benefit, so the other party is also not getting the full benefit. It's the middle way to resolve the issue. Appeasement. This is an approach that suggests that the parties try to accommodate one another without dealing with the real issue. Like, just keep the issue at one side and ignore it. It's in many countries. You can think like the Kashmir issue, like the Palestine issue. The other countries who are having a war are in the war zone from very long time, and just the authorities cannot do about this. So just keep it on one side and leave it as it is. Problem solving. This is joint solution focused approach to conflicts, right? Now moving toward the ABCs of conflict analysis. What is this? Okay. When conflicts become violent, there are generally 3 ways to respond: working around and in and on the conflict. Working around the conflict. So what is this? Let's have a look. We avoid working in areas that have passed a certain level of violence. So it is called working around the conflict. Conflict is still inside, and it is as it is. You don't bother to resolve it, just work around this. Okay, work inside the conflict. So working in the conflict, we continue to serve in violent areas in a conflict sensitive way, but we don't try to address the conflict directly, right? It's not the direct way, but still we are working in the war zone to solve this issue. The third one is working on the conflict. We work on reconciliation, peace building, and addressing the underlying causes of violence. I think this is the best way, but it depends on the conflict, how big it is, what is the geographical background, and how you can do it. Is it solvable or not? It all depends on the, you can say, the analytical skill of the diplomats and the politicians. Working in conflict is almost as challenging as working on conflict, because both requires us to start with a detailed conflict analysis, whether we want to actively build peace or just to keep working in a violent environment without doing harm. We need to start by understanding the conflict. So without a good conflict analysis, we cannot answer the question that are the cornerstones of a conflict sensitive approach. That's what I told you, that without a good analysis, you cannot do it. So how will our work affect the conflict, and how will the conflict affect our work? And if we get the answers to these questions wrong, our project can easily do harm. So increasing people vulnerability to conflict and putting ourselves and our staff at a risk is another point to be considered, right? So doing or working on these sensitive areas or the topics are the issues. You have to take care of everything. So in a conflict, the violent behavior we see has its roots in people's attitude and the political economic context, right? Now, what is this triangle? John Galtung's conflict triangle, right? So let's talk about this. That what is this? There are three things on which we are going to talk, which is the direct violence, structural violence, and cultural violence, right? So the ABC triangle is a simple framework for exploring the impact and causes of the conflict. You should complete one triangle for each of the major groups involved in the conflict, right? This is the main structure or framework for solving the conflict. For example, if one group is called Y and the other group is X, it will be a good idea to apply the ABC triangle of conflict analysis to each group. If you are working in conflict, you can use the triangle to answer the question like, how will our work be affected by the behavior we have identified? Will it affect any of the contextual factors that drive the conflict? How will our staff and our work be perceived by each group, given the attitude we have identified, right? So these are the areas where your real skills, your abilities, your real communication skills, analytical skills, problem solving skills are required. So examples are like fear of losing power, resentment about historical wrongs, negative stereotypes, ethnic or religious hatred behavior, like social unrest, mass action, demonstration and mass misimprisonments and denial of human rights. So these are some examples that are unjust land ownership, lack of jobs, opportunities, access to resources, and scarce natural resources, and unequal political representation, unfair social system. These all are the examples of the conflicts in the society and has different phases and different ways how to resolve it. So root and branch, sometimes violent conflict is a shallow or apparent. The root of the violence are not deep, perhaps based in is a misunderstanding. In other contexts, there may be a little violent behavior, but there are deep-rooted problems in people's attitude and the context. So this is a latent conflict where it is essential to address the roots of conflict before they lead to actual violence. The most difficult kind of conflict is persistent conflict in which violence is both visible and deep-rooted, right? Okay, problem. I have to explain a little bit more on this triangle. This triangle works on the assumptions that the best way to define peace is to define the violence. So direct violence can take many forms. In its classic forms, it involves the use of physical force, like killing or torture, rape or sexual assault. In previous examples, I told you about just the general perception of the people or the society. But moving toward in these examples, like cultural violence is the prevailing attitude and beliefs that we have been taught since our childhood and that surround us in daily life about the power and necessity of violence. So these are the such types in which the politicians or the diplomats are the people who are appointed on these positions has to work on that. So structural violence exists when some groups, classes, gender, nationalities are assumed to have, in fact, do have more access and good resources, opportunities than the other people or other groups or other classes, right? So this is the difference between the structural violence and the cultural violence and the direct violence. So unequal advantage is built into the very social, political, and economic system that governs society, states, and the world. So now moving toward the problem solving process. The first one is identify the issues, then understand the interest, understand everyone's interest, then list the problem solutions options. What are the options you have, and listed that how we are going to solve it. Then the next step is evaluate the option. And after that, we move to select an option or the options, like one or multiple options. After that, document the agreement, and last one is agree on contingencies, monitoring, and evaluation, right? Steps to resolve the conflict. Communicate. Open communication is a key to solve the dispute. Actively listen to what the other people have to say without interrupting. Then review the option, talk over the options, looking for solutions that benefit everyone. And at the end it with a win-win solution. Right? So this is our last slide, and this is the end of our lesson number 7. Hope you enjoyed it and understand it. Looking forward to the last lesson. Have a great day and see you. Bye.